Hello, everybody. So in this video, I'm going to be discussing the project final report. So I have two sample versions here. I have one if you did your confidence interval and hypothesis test with means, and one if you did the confidence interval and hypothesis test with proportions. So depending on what your confidence interval and hypothesis test is, that's going to vary what you want to put in your final report. So let me go ahead and share my screen here and go to the instructions first. All right, so I put this together in a Word document. I found that to be the easiest. You are allowed to put it together in a PowerPoint or in any format that you wish, as long as it's readable and it looks good. I recommend just doing a written Word report. I found that to be the simplest, but I know PowerPoint would be also an option too for some people who might be interested in that. And you don't need to do anything new for this final report. You've already done all the work in your previous 7 assignments. What you need to do is you basically need to just pull the different pieces together and make it into one big report. So the introduction part. So you need to tell me what data set you chose, why. So the why part, I don't know if we ever answered that in project assignment 2. I don't believe we ever did. So you might have to add something on that, like a sentence. The population, any relevant research about the topic, and I'm going to talk more about that when I go to the sample, what we consider to be relevant, and the questions that we were interested in answering. So that's also from assignment 2, and why those questions are important and who would the answers be important to. That is also something that you will need to add. And then you're going to cite your sources at the end of the document. So all of this information basically comes from project assignment 2 with a couple additional things that we just need to add in. So I'm going to show you the means version first and then show you the proportions version for the first section. All right, so this is more relevant if you did your research on means. So I said the data set that I chose, the repository it came from, why I chose the data set, which was a new sentence that I added in, the population, and then I included some of my research. I only included the research that related to that variable that you used in your confidence interval and hypothesis test. So for me, that was salary. So I only included the relevant research related to salary. So I'm trying to keep it, consolidated and relevant. So it shouldn't be a ton of research. It should really just be mostly any research you used in project assignment 6 and 7 and 5, 6, and 7. Whatever research you compared your data to in those assignments, that's the research you want to include. So I included that. I also included another just interesting tidbit about salaries. So just try to keep it to the variable that you used in project assignments 5 through 7. And then I mentioned my 3 questions from assignment 2, and then I said why those questions would be important. That was also something I had to add. So all of this information basically came from project assignment 2. Some of the research may come from assignments 5, 6, and 7 if you had to do more research later on. Remember, I only want the relevant research related to the variable from assignments 5 through 7. And then the proportions version is almost identical. So the proportions version, the only difference here is my research, basically. So everything else I basically kept the same. So my research then was related to the sex variable, which was the variable I used in when I did the proportions example for assignment 6 and 7. So once again, I only included the relevant research related to that variable that I used for the confidence interval and hypothesis test. And so once again, all this comes from assignment 2, but any research from assignments 3, 6, and 7 that is relevant, if you had to do more research, also please include that. All right. Now let's talk about the next section. So the next section is the exploratory data analysis. So what you put in this section also depends on your variable for the confidence interval and hypothesis test. So if you did means, I'm expecting you to do A here. If you did proportions, I'm expecting you to do B. Nobody really did a correlation test or anything or really explored with that, so no need to really include that. If you want to, go for it, but you don't have to. And so you don't have to include everything that you did in all the exploratory assignments. You just need to include what's relevant. So you need to include what's listed here. So for the quantitative data, numerical summary, there's a whole, you can just copy paste it basically. I'll show you what I mean. And then include at least 2 graphs of your data. So if you did the qualitative variables, so if you did proportions, you may have to go back and make a pie chart if you only have a bar graph or vice versa, because you need 2 graphs, but that shouldn't take very long. And then include a description of the data exploration. You already did that. So all this information should be coming from either assignment 5 if you did means, or assignment 3 if you did proportions. None of this should be new, or very little of it should be new. Let's make it that way. So let me go to the mean sample here. All right. So the first thing you need to do is just mention again your data set in the repository and kind of just, I guess, intro into the information. So I conducted several exploratory data analyses. One of these was on the quantitative variable salary. And then the following table shows a general summary of the data created in our Guru. So basically I just copy pasted the table. So all the top part of the table up through the outliers, just literally copy pasted into the document. Super easy. You don't need to change anything about it unless you did something wrong. If you did something wrong previously, please look at my feedback before you put anything in here. That's very important. I will count off for it again if it's still wrong. And then I also included my histogram and box plot. And then this little blurb here, this came from my end of project assignment 5. So I basically just copy pasted that description and put it at the bottom. So basically most of this part of the assignment should be copying and pasting. And then for proportions, very similar. So for proportions, the first thing you need to copy and paste is your frequency and relative frequency table. And then I need your pie chart and bar graph. And then copy and paste the little blurb from the end. I also need you to mention somewhere, though, it also says you need to tell me what the mode is. Remember that the mode is the most common data value. So here, I just said in my description down here that males is the mode. So just make sure that you include that in there somewhere that is asked for in the instructions. And like I said, you may have to make, if you don't have both of these, you may have to make the other one. And this all came from assignment 3. All right, so let's now talk about the next part. All right, so the next part is the inference procedure. So this directly comes from assignments 6 and 7. So basically what I did was I ended up copying what I had in assignment 7 directly, and then adding what I needed here. So state the claim, state the non-alternative, etc. So all this stuff here comes from assignment 7. It's almost a direct copy of assignment 7, but you need a couple extra things. You need the technology screenshots of the confidence interval, which came from assignment 6. And then what do the results suggest about the population? A lot of this came also from assignment 6, the end of assignment 6. So let me share my screen and show you my samples here. So here's the one for means. So I basically copy and pasted exactly what I had from assignment 7. So this whole table is assignment 7, basically. And then you can see here I added in the image for the confidence interval, which was not in assignment 7. You will need to add that in, just copy and paste the image into the table. And then this part down here is kind of a slightly altered version of the end of assignment 6. So I basically just related both the hypothesis test and the confidence interval rather than just the confidence interval. And so everybody's confidence interval and hypothesis test should match, hopefully. So the rest of it should be the same, basically. So that was pretty much a copy and paste from the end of assignment 6. And then the proportions one. Basically the same thing. So I copy and pasted everything from assignment 7, put the confidence interval picture in here, and then altered this a little bit just so that I'm talking about both the results of the hypothesis test and confidence interval together. Basically just change the wording a little bit. All right, and that is that part. And then the last section is a conclusion and reflection. And this is a new part, but it really shouldn't be more than a paragraph. So we've basically been copying and pasting the whole time, altering it a little bit. So now, what conclusions do you believe you could draw as a result of the project? If your results weren't what you expected, why do you think that? What did you learn about the population and the variables? And what did you learn about the statistical analysis you conducted? And anything in addition you want to add. And then just your references need to be at the end, which you can just include links to the sources for any research. You have to include those links, you will get a slight deduction. So for the means one, these are almost identical, I believe, if I remember correctly. Well, actually not quite. So here's the sources. First of all, you can see I just included the link, doesn't need to be anything fancy. So then I just talked about basically my results. So my results were surprising. I didn't expect such a drastic difference, and why I think that is. So I don't know the school the data came from. So maybe this school pays higher salaries than the average. And so I'm saying I can make a cautious conclusion that the salaries are higher than the $57,372, but I need more research to confirm this. And then this is kind of just a sample of what you can sort of say for what you learned about the statistical analysis. So I feel I solidified my understanding of data analysis, confidence intervals, and hypothesis testing. I better understand how these concepts are applied and how they can be used to draw conclusions. So something along those lines. And then similarly for proportions. So once again, I had surprising results. I didn't expect such a drastic difference between my research value and my data set. I don't know where the data came from, so I can't really make any specific conclusions. Maybe the school attracts more males for some reason, but I can make a cautious conclusion that the proportion of college professors who are females is less than the 49.8%, but I need more research to actually confirm this and see if it's actually true or not, or if it was just this data set. And then the same ending here. And you can see my sources here for the research earlier. And that's it. So that is the project final report. One final thing to remember about this, please look at my feedback on all of your individual project assignments before you include anything in the final report. If you're working with assignment 3, if you're working with assignment 5, 6, 7, 2, whatever, please look at my feedback before you add anything into the final report. If you don't make necessary adjustments, you will get a deduction for it. And so that's it for the project final report. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.